If JFK were resurrected today, he would not even remotely recognize his political party. 3 Democratic Socialist candidates just won their primaries in New York. It was a sweep. That included one whose history of tweets are positively putrid. She joked about using the American flag as a napkin, and they were all endorsed by Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani. How radical are they? Well,
Maria Elisa Avila Chevalier is one of the more controversial candidates. CNN earlier in the year reported that she had deleted previous Twitter posts expressing views for abolishing police, prisons, borders, seizing private property, nationalizing major industries, calling into question Israel's right to exist. She spoke to a friend of the show, Ested Herndon, in a recent interview, said that all deportations are immoral.
As CNN host Abby Phillips said, Chevalier overcame great financial odds to defeat an incumbent with institutional Democratic support. Every single one of these candidates, Chevalier, but also Assemblywoman Claire Valdez, who won the primary for New York's 7th Congressional District, and former City Comptroller Brad Lander, who beat incumbent Representative Dan Goldman in the primary for the 10th Congressional District. They all despise America in its current form, and they want to transform it into a Marxist hellscape. This is Claire Valdez.
So are we ready to free Palestine? Are we ready to abolish ICE? Are we ready to win Medicare for all, housing for all, and unions for all?
Here's the thing about that though, Claire. You can't abolish immigration enforcement and have Medicare for all. There are limited resources, our taxpayer dollars, to pay for healthcare for some low-income or elderly Americans as it is, before you expand it to all citizens. How does Claire expect the government to pay for the health insurance also of millions of illegal aliens who would be presumably granted amnesty in their regime? The math will not be mathing. Oh, but she wants the working class taxpayer to fund another group's healthcare as well.
We've seen Democratic, politicians think that they can, trade trans people away for, a bigger share of, I don't even know what electorate they're trying to win back when they do that. And so we have to be, focused, really enshrining their rights as we do, within universal programs, and making sure that Medicare for all includes, gender affirming care and healthcare for trans folks. We need to make sure that we're enshrining their rights in a trans Bill of Rights and in workplaces.
So the working class is going to pay for that, and also the wealthy, their favorite villain, who, by the way, already pay the vast majority of our taxes. The top 1% of taxpayers paid a 23.1% average rate, 6 times higher than the 3.7% average rate paid by the bottom half of taxpayers, according to the Tax Foundation. The top 50% of all taxpayers paid 97% of all federal individual income taxes, while the bottom 50% paid the remaining 3%. And the share of taxes paid by wealthy Americans is higher than in most other countries. So for all the Democrats' accusations that rich people are just evading taxes left and right, getting away with highway robbery, it's just not true. Here's Brad Lander.
Last Thursday, I gave a name to that spirit that has been moving in New York City. I said it was solidarity. I said it was the force we need to vanquish our biggest foes. And I don't mean Wemby and the Spurs. Solidarity is the force that we need to vanquish Trump's fascism, to abolish ICE, and to stand up to the billionaires who are rigging our economy against us.
Now, for whatever reason, Israel was the obsession of these candidates above probably all other issues. They talked about it ad nauseum to pander to their extremist base, which feels the same way.
I believe, as a proud Jewish New Yorker, that Israel's genocide in Gaza is a desecration, is a violation of the understanding that everyone is created in God's image, every one of those Palestinian kids in Gaza, just as divine as my beloved children. And so, yes, in Congress, I will not vote for any more U.S. military aid to Israel.
Brad Lander's opponent, Dan Goldman, is a Jewish congressman who does support Israel. In the few days before the primary, he was blacklisted by a coffee shop in New York City for his pro-Israel views. You cannot make this up.
I was fascinated by the Goldman-Lander primary. I agree with you. I think Dan's going to lose. I don't agree with much of anything he's done in Congress, but I'm surprised you sort of glossed over the main issue in this race, which is Israel. I mean, Dan Goldman is a congressman, and he's Jewish, and he went into a coffee shop this weekend in Brooklyn, and they said, you're not welcome here anymore. Brad Lander is out speaking in mosques, telling those people that he'd like to go align himself with Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad. Dan Goldman's only sin, I guess, is that he thinks Israel has a right to exist.
These candidates are obviously taking their cues from Mamdani, the sitting mayor of a city with a lot of Jewish Americans, who had to say this very recently.
We need that because, as Gramsci once wrote, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. These monsters take many forms today. In those who fund television ads that blanket the airwaves with misleading and bad faith attacks about Claire, Brad, and Dari. Those who would rather spend far more on political contributions than they would ever be made to pay in taxes. In AIPAC, for whom the only thing more frightening than democracy being allowed to run its course is an end to genocide and Netanyahu's wars.
I would just point Mamdani to the Supreme Court case Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission, which declared that political donations are in fact free speech. The rich are allowed to participate in elections that way, and again, they carry the burden of our tax regime. The elephant in the room with these races as well is that they all think America is responsible for 9/11. In either no uncertain terms, or they imply it quite heavily. They are third worldists in the sense that they think it's cool to import people into America who do not respect our rule of law, our constitution, our customs. These candidates pander to Islamists and dismiss the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, which is actually real. Instead, they make Israel the boogeyman. My friend Megan Basham summed it up very well. I'll never see Jews stringing up little girls because they wore lip gloss or jeans. I've never heard of Jewish rape gangs. I've never heard of Jews forcing their women to live every moment of their public life peering through a slit in a black sheet. Jews never blew up our buildings or beheaded Christians. You have a problem with Israel. Fine. Register your geopolitical opposition to our foreign policy with regards to Israel. But I've never been afraid of what a Jew would do to me or my daughters. But I actually think that the biggest psyop of this communist momentum right now in the Democratic Party is the idea that these candidates are working class champions. Fun fact, all three who won in New York City this week weren't born in New York City, weren't raised in New York City, and never created a job outside a campaign staff in New York City. Not only that, but their voters are not working class. Daralitza Chevalier lost the Bronx part of her district by 30 points. The Bronx is a much more working class borough than perhaps Manhattan. She also lost predominantly Black and Hispanic areas, and she lost lower income areas by 10 points. She won with young voters and higher income voters, and won majority college educated areas by a whopping 20 points. So the big wins for these Mamdani-backed contenders were driven by young college grads, obviously at odds with the party's traditional working class and minority base. The less Hispanic and more college-educated a district was, the more likely it was to vote for the communist. I wonder if it's because a lot of the Hispanics maybe have memories in their family of communism failing in their home countries. But this is precisely what happened with the mayoral primary election between Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo. It's the same pattern repeating. Mamdani won a greater number of New York's higher income neighborhoods than Cuomo, according to an analysis of preliminary precinct level results. Cuomo won more neighborhoods where Black and Hispanic residents make up the biggest racial or ethnic group. The Wall Street Journal wrote that it was the downwardly mobile elites who elected Mamdani. His strongest support came from what's been called the commie corridor, as political commentator Michael Lang dubbed it, which is Astoria, Queens, gentrifying Brooklyn, some parts of Manhattan. Since people tend to compare themselves to members of their own social milieu, it should hardly come as a surprise that graduates of selective colleges living in eye-wateringly expensive urban neighborhoods resent the fact that they can't afford a home of their own. All but the richest millennials find themselves priced out of fashionable enclaves in Berkeley, California, and Brooklyn, in part thanks to the stringent land use regulation and other anti-development measures. One could always move to a lower cost, less competitive city, where a middle-class life is more readily achievable, but to many urban millennials, doing so would be tantamount to admitting defeat. In a nutshell, it's these disgruntled, college-educated kids, transplants to New York City, many of them, who want communism because they think it'll bring down other top percentage elites who they are deeply jealous of. And they don't realize that the reason they can't have their nice brownstone or maybe a more reasonable rent price in their apartment building is because of anti-free market policies that prevent construction, that prevent supply from outpacing demand, thereby bringing down the price. So they're just asking for more big government, more leftism to treat the problem that was created by big government and leftism. And obviously the blue-collar, salt-of-the-earth folks who've lived in New York City for multiple generations, the majority of them did not vote for these socialists. They didn't just move here yesterday or a couple years ago. They know better. They stay because their roots are here, their family's here, but they know that the government policies make it extremely inhospitable to build a life here. The case for Mamdaniism's staying power is straightforward. The Democratic coalition is increasingly dominated by younger, more educated voters. In 2024, 48% of Kamala Harris's voters had a bachelor's degree, and the same percentage were under 50. By comparison, 33% of Donald Trump's voters were college educated, and only 39% were under 50. Harris's coalition was more than twice as urban as Trump's, at 28% to 13%. One way or another, the Democratic Party's next presidential nominee will have to reckon with the power of millennial Mamdani voters. I think the reckoning is here. It's at the door. Now, it's true that New York City is a bubble that's uniquely prone to elect lunatics and experiment with far-left policies, but the polling shows that this is a national dilemma for the Democratic Party.
Well, among Democrats themselves, the Democratic Socialists of America have a higher net favor rating than the Democratic Party does, at least those who are members of Congress. I mean, just take a look here. Dem Socialists of America, plus 17 points. Democrats in Congress, plus 4 points. No wonder that Dem Socialists are getting nominated across the political map in different primaries because, simply put, they are more popular than the Democrats currently in charge.
The Democratic Party's in a civil war, and the Dem Socialists appear to have the momentum.
Well, New York City matters because the two most exciting left-wing candidates are here, AOC and Mamdani, but also this is the stronghold for the establishment, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffrey. This is a battle between the establishment and this insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment tonight. If Mamdani gets a hat trick, 3 out of 3, this is a new era for the Democratic Party, and you can't write off New York City because this is the place where both, it's a power center for the establishment and the insurgency, and they're going head-to-head tonight. And right now, this is no longer a movement. This is a movement and a machine at the same time. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. If Mamdani pulls off a hat trick, it is a new era in Democratic Party politics.
So this isn't actually a gloating moment for Republicans, by the way. They may think that Christmas came early because there's no way swing states like Pennsylvania and Nevada embrace these nutcases like a deep blue city would, like New York. But Van Jones is right that the center of gravity for the Democratic establishment is also in New York, and it just got humiliated. The Overton window of Democratic politics just went off the cliff. And that's a tragedy, not just for those loser incumbents, but for America. Let me know your thoughts. I promise I read every comment. Hit that subscribe button to keep the party going. I'm Caroline Downey of National Review, signing off.